Hello, everyone on Patreon. Thank you so much for voting this month on an Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode. And the winner this month is Bang You're Dead, which is quite which is quite the title. This is season 7, episode 2 that Alfred Hitchcock directed. It was written by Harold Swanton from a story by Margery Vosper. The stars are Stephen Dunne, Biff Elliot, Juanita or Moore, Marta Kristen. It's got a pretty large cast because there's a number of small parts in it as well. And for those of you who perhaps have not seen it, the plot, according to IMDb, is a 5-year-old boy who finds his uncle's revolver, partially loads it with bullets, and plays with it in public, unaware of its deadly power. So that's the story. And I want to welcome Joel Guns to today's discussion. He's going to be joining me every month now, reviewing one of these episodes. Joel, for those of you who are meeting Joel for the first time, he is a writer and filmmaker. He is also known as the Alfred Hitchcock Geek. He is the host of the yearly HitchCon, a conference dedicated to Alfred Hitchcock, and the publisher of the online magazine Hitchcockian Quarterly. Joel, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me.
So glad to be here. What an awesome episode that we're starting this new stage in our relationship with. Couldn't get off with a bigger bang.
Yeah, literally. And thank God, I mean, this is all spoilers. Thank God no one actually gets shot in this episode because it certainly feels as though someone was going to get shot. Before we jump into the episode, I just was curious. I imagine you being the Alfred Hitchcock geek himself, you've seen this whole series in the past, I imagine.
Actually, this is a bit of a blank spot in my scholarship. So I think I've seen all of the episodes that Hitchcock directed, and then a few more beyond that. But it isn't really my area of expertise. And I regret that, because every time I see a new episode, my head explodes with new inferences and ideas and ways that these episodes kind of folded into his films and his other projects. So it's I think it's essential viewing for somebody who's really into Hitchcock films, into his work. So
I agree. I never really gave the show much thought or saw much of it, but every episode I see has been so good. And I know we touched on this last time because you had said a lot of the scholars don't really talk about this show that much. Do you know why that is, or have you any idea why that might be?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. One is there's just a myopia. People want to focus on his films because that's where he put his energy. And then Hitchcock himself said that he, didn't really. He was pretty hands off with his work. So with his TV work, so that has led people to assume that there's not much to be found there. I would argue just the opposite. That his producing team. They had been known him for years, Joan Harrison, and name slips me, but he goes all the way back to Saboteur. They were tight friends. They knew his work very well. And I think they channeled, the Hitchcock spirit so well that I think we can actually give him, a sort of an influential credit over the series that's greater than people have done so far. And, so, and I think Bang You're Dead is a perfect example of that.
Oh no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it is such a nail biter, this episode, because here we see this child whose uncle comes and visits and says he's got this surprise for him, and he takes that as the gun that's in a real gun in his. I mean, it has a sense of humor at the same time, like a lot of these episodes do. They all have this black sense of humor, like a lot of Hitchcock's movies. And he's obsessed with, cowboy TV shows, and you see him with his friends playing off the top. They have like a better toy gun than he does. One of them can put I think that's like a cap gun, right? Because he's loading it, his friend. And so he gets this. You could see, again, that he was not as big a fan of his toy, and so he thinks, oh, here's the toy. This must be a toy gun from my uncle, and he puts one bullet in, and every single scene, you think I mean, I could barely look because I thought he is going to shoot someone. And of course, he keeps adding bullets to the
Yeah.
point where some of those people, he's holding it with a loaded gun, like the woman in the grocery store, the young woman who's doing the samples, giving him food samples. And again, the way in which he does suspense is so great, as he says, it's that the audience knows more than the characters. So we know he's got real bullets. He doesn't even know he's got real bullets, and no one in this episode, other than when the parents find out that he's got a gun and they're trying to find him, no one, we know more. So we're participating emotionally by saying, "Oh my God, run away or get that toy gun out of, or can someone please see that that's a real gun?"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and everyone's just like, yeah, they're laughing it off, and like the mailman, and it's really gripping and emotional. Did you find that in regards to the suspense?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it many times, and even before I saw it, I knew the story. It was that well known, and and you can see that it's Hitchcock directed it, of course, and
Yes.
it's also you could take it as a sort of a remake in a sense of the bomb in a film can scene from Sabotage, because it's the same setup. We've got a boy carrying around this explosive device.
Right.
He doesn't know that he's got it. And so the audience is on the edge of its seat, wondering, if and when something terrible is going to happen. And of course, as famously happened in Sabotage, the bomb does go off, and and the boy is killed along with the dog.
Right.
And in this
God.
in this one, you could say
I
that
still haven't seen
Hitchcock
that.
sort of,
I still, that's one of the
yeah.
one of the few I have not seen of his yet.
Yeah, and so you could say that he corrected that mistake. He got a lot of
Right.
flack from his fans for killing the boy. Well, this time nobody gets
I
killed.
didn't know that.
So, his reputation kind of took a hit, so to speak, after
I didn't know that.
Sabotage. So this time he said, "Okay, we're not going to kill the boy or anybody else."
That's
so
interesting.
He redeemed himself. Yeah,
but I had read some. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, well, just that whole idea. I love what you're bringing up about this site. Kind of putting this into its context. Right. So you got, this gun culture that was, emerging in the 50s. And, this, the little boy, Jackie, he's criticized because his gun isn't real enough. People wanted their realistic, violence. And I think that's a really important point when you put this into that larger context of playing cowboys and Indians, and then the Cold War that was taking place in. I think this is one of the most multi-layered, nuanced scripts, I think, of any Hitchcock Presents,
I
episode
agree.
I've seen. There's a lot of depth in there, a lot of history.
Yeah. No, and what I also loved about it is that it's a very simple story at the same time. I mean, it's not. We're not going into surrealism or
or
character.
Are we? There's some interesting stuff. So like you got who is it? Uncle Rick. He shows up, and he's kind of a surreal character.
Yeah, he is. He's weird.
He gets out of the car, and Jackie says, "Where have you been?" And he says, "Oh, I'm back from the wars."
Yeah.
Which, just that line opens up a whole rift of possibilities about what this episode is really about. But then he goes into the house, and he says, "Well, I was in Africa as a car salesman." And then he talks about the social unrest in Africa. And let's just put the two and two together here. So he goes to Africa to sell cars, American cars, presumably at the height of car culture, into this zone that he describes as being, violent and all kinds of civil unrest. And in fact, in 1961, Africa was awash in all kinds of violence from countries that were trying to obtain their independence from colonial powers, France and Algeria and so forth.
Right.
And so he says, "I'm a car salesman," and that doesn't add up. Like, to me, I'd say, I think that's a cover story. And so then if it's a cover story, if it's a cover story, well, what's he covering? So, as a point of historical fact, make of it what you will, in 1959, the United States did install the CIA actually installed an Africa bureau in Africa, and their focus was on Ghana and the Congo. And their job was to make sure that American interests were upheld. And there's a whole
Oh,
backstory
that's
to that.
interesting.
So
Yeah, I thought there
my
must have
vote
been
says that
something to that.
this guy's a
Yeah,
spook. He's a spook. He's a CIA
yeah.
agent. That's what he is.
Yeah, I
And
thought
then,
it seems so strange that I thought there's got to be something to what he's saying here about what he does, because otherwise he would have just been, maybe they could have just made him a cop and he's got his gun, or
yeah,
just some guy. I mean, who's careless with his gun that he just let. He could have been an accountant. He could have been anyone. And I just thought that's such a unique occupation that there had to have been something to it.
Yeah, and then the next thing he does is he says he's got gifts for everybody. He tells Jackie he's got a gift for him. We never find out what that gift is.
Yeah, that's true.
And so we can kind of assume that the only gift that Jackie got was this live gun, which is interesting. But then the other gift that he brings is this mask.
Oh, right, the African mask.
This African mask that you look at it and it's got feathers and it's painted and it's kind of scary looking. And it's he acquired it under dubious circumstances. We're not sure if it was some kind of scene of violence, or maybe it was a tribal ritual that he said, would make you wish you were back home. But he said he obtained it under scary circumstances. And somebody says, yeah, this isn't a tourist trap, tchotchke that he picked up. Somebody says this should be in a museum. And then, then the husband says, yeah, I don't want this sitting on the table next to the olives. So this mask has some kind of occult power. It's got it's obtained under these sketchy circumstances. It's brought into the house. It kind of freaks people out. This guy who's not exactly who he says he is bringing it into the home. So we've got all these weird unanswered questions in the story. My posit is that that mask actually does have some kind of occult power, and it's the driving force behind the whole story. It's what prompts Jackie to find the gun and then carry it around the neighborhood on his potential shooting spree.
Well, because he refers to it as something to do with a bloodbath. The mask, right? It's just as we're talking, it almost reminds me of Joseph Cotton, the uncle, coming in and wrecking all this chaos. Not that here. Oh my God, why is the name of that movie
Uncle
escaping
Charlie.
me?
Shadow of a Doubt. Yeah,
Shadow of a Doubt. Jesus, I'll have to edit that because I'll get flack for not remembering. I love that movie, Shadow of a Doubt. I mean, obviously that's different because he's a murderer and he's coming in to do no good. Whereas this, this character is much more mysterious and ambiguous. So he's maybe not. He doesn't come with any bad intent, but he does bring something in that has led to this dark.
He's a
dark,
total
twisted,
Uncle Charlie.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, that's a brilliant observation. I think that's very much. I would not be surprised if Hitch had that in mind too. He's another uncle.
Yes.
He's a sweet, nice guy on the surface, but he's kind of got this darkness under the surface. He's Uncle Charlie, and who himself was, of course, a killer and a murderer, and he sort of is portrayed as kind of a vampiric kind of a guy, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm always fascinated by how we see things consistently in Hitchcock's films, and you could say that about any filmmaker who has a large body of work. There are often consistent themes or consistent type of characters. There was one thing that really popped out to me, and I suppose you could say this about any scene, but the scene when he first gets the gun and he goes downstairs and at this point there's only one bullet in the gun and he's pointing it at his mother and everybody assumes it's his toy gun, they are talking about something completely different, whereas Hitchcock is focusing on the boy and the gun. So it's that great cinematic way of telling a story where he's telling you to look at one thing while we're hearing something that actually has nothing to do with where we're looking and what we're emotionally invested in. Very much like, I mean, my favorite scene of a Hitchcock, of an example of something like that is in Rope, where the housemaid is coming in and she is taking all of the food and everything off of the table where the guy's body is in, and we're thinking, oh no, she's gonna find the body. And it's that shot just on her going in and out of the kitchen, and everything that the people are saying doesn't matter at all. You may as well have just, you don't care what they're saying. What they're saying is not even important. You are emotionally responding to the, oh my God, don't, if you open that coffee table, you are going to find that dead body in there. And so that scene, I mean, you could say that about any scene, because again, the suspense is, we know that that's a real gun and no one else does. But I thought that particular, the way he shot it, just focusing on that gun and the boy the whole time. I mean, you could hardly even see the adults other than the mother when he talks to the mother. I thought that was very Hitchcockian. Was that something that stood out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you have this, I think the counterpoint there is you have the implied or the potential violence of this gun, this death dealing, murder weapon. And then, the counterpoint to that is the conversation in the background. I can't remember what it is, but basically the message of the conversation is, we are complacent about the violence that surrounds us. We're complacent and unseeing of the violence that's in our, in our house right now. And I think that shows up in a lot of ways. Like I think that conversation that takes place over, layered on top of the gun is a sort of a sampling or a synecdoche of what we see all over the place in this episode. So got this guy coming back from Africa. There's implied violence, that he's witnessed there. He brings some representation of at least something dark and wild into the home.
Right.
And then we've got this weird, cringy characterization rather of the African-American housekeeper. And today in 2022, when we see African-Americans in films playing servant roles in old movies, we've been taught that wasn't okay then, it's not okay now. We kind of cringe.
Right.
But in 1961, when the episode came out, what was the vibe? And things were already changing. You had Black actors in Hollywood insisting on more dignified roles, like Sidney Poitier and others. And so even in 1961, to represent a housekeeper in that way would have been a little bit awkward, I think. And then when we put it in context of, this African background and these themes of colonialization and this history of slavery in the country, I think again, Hitchcock is making a very strong point
about, interesting,
about American culture and how baked into the culture violence is and has been from day one, for the last 400 years.
Right.
So I think it's like the tell for that for me is, so you got this mask, it's a representative of African culture. We don't know what country, and but it's in the house. And when he's pointing the gun at the housekeeper, and this is the moment we know that if he pulls that trigger,
because it's fully loaded,
blood. And what happens is we see the mask basically fly in from off camera, off screen, and bump the gun, and he shoots and he gets there or nothing. And so what I think, again, if we kind of take an occult theme here, it's almost as if, and I don't want to push this point too hard, but it's almost as if the mask said, okay, I came in to sort of disrupt things, but you're not going to kill my people anymore.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
And so the mask intervenes.
I didn't think of that. That's a really, really great observation. I actually looked back a couple of times because I wasn't sure if the mask actually hit, if he managed to throw the mask at the gun and that's why he missed. I mean, I assume that's what happened, but it's happened so fast, like it would, of course, in any situation. But he comes in and he screams, the father screams the boy's name, and then he throws the mask, and I assume that it hits the gun, and that's why when he shoots, it hits the mirror and misses her. But that's a really interesting, and I suppose perhaps he shot it so it wasn't so obvious that the to not to hit that point too hard, perhaps, with the African connection, to the more of a political message there. I could only imagine perhaps that's why he didn't make it so obvious that the mask hit the gun. I don't know what you thought.
Well, I think the way it plays, I think when Hitchcock is directing, you have to really go with what your experience is when you're watching it, and then later on you can kind of connect the dots about who did what. Because so it's not like the mask, levitated across the room or anything like that, but within it, it's sort of this shocking, surprising moment. So we don't know where the mask has come from and how it got there. All we know that bumped his gun, and then tellingly, this is very Hitchcockian touch. The gun fires, misses the housekeeper, but it hits the mirror and shatters it. And of course, in a Hitchcock, presentation, a mirror is never just a mirror, but it's a reflection of, the psyche of the people and of us, and of the characters, and blah blah blah. So I think there's a lot of symbolism in there. Like it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sort of draws attention to itself, and I think that justifies this sort of a kind of an open-ended interpretation of things for sure. Yeah,
that's really fascinating, because I that hadn't really dawned on me, but I think that's a really, really smart and great interpretation. There, I couldn't help but notice that it's the POV shot he uses with the gun on the maid is the same shot in Spellbound at the end, where with the guy who has the POV on Ingrid Bergman, which of course which is such a great shot. And what's fascinating is that you never see anyone do that anymore. Like I can't imagine anyone doing that now. I don't know why those went out of style, because I think they're so effective.
Yeah, it's a James Bond move. We kind of see it stylized in the intro to in the intro credits to James Bond, right? With the viewfinder. But
right, of course, yeah.
And Bond, arguably stole that from Spellbound as well. So
for sure, yeah, because I mean that's mid-40s, well before the Bond films. I had read somewhere, I don't know if this is true, perhaps you know, but I had read that this subject matter meant a lot to him in terms of gun safety. And do you know much about that?
Well, so I think, part of it is like, this is the only episode in his entire series where he kind of plays it straight. He winks at the audience.
His opening,
But in the opening, he says, typically my intros, to these episodes are flippant, but don't let that fool you. I've got a serious intent here, or something to that effect.
Right.
He uses the word flippant, right? And then at the end of it, he very kind of sternly addresses the audience and says, gun violence is real. There's something you can do about it. Protect your home, protect your guns, protect your kids. And
right.
And so again, I think that's where this is because he was really bringing something that was deep within him, out. Like, this really mattered to him. Again, I think it justifies taking a close look at this episode and really, breaking it down shot by shot, line by line. It seems like there's not a wasted shot, not a wasted line of dialogue that doesn't have 2 or 3 or 10 meanings.
Oh no, absolutely. Absolutely. I did read, like I said, I read that it was a subject very, very near and dear to him. And also, I don't know if you read this, but the little boy in it who plays Jackie, his name is Bill Mummy, or is it Mummy? Apparently you probably read this, but apparently he was having a hard time hitting his marks, to the point where Hitchcock was getting so frustrated that he took him aside and said he was going to nail his feet down. And that blood would come out like milk from a straw. I mean, I imagine knowing Hitchcock, he probably said that in a humorous way, even though he was probably really pissed.
I don't know. Apparently Bill Mummy was pretty traumatized. He still talks about it. Like
oh my God, that's funny.
He has one Hollywood story to tell, and that's it. And
because I haven't seen him in anything else. I don't know if he did much else.
He did half a dozen other Hitchcock presents.
Oh, he did. Yeah,
only 3, I think, actually. And then, but he was kind of a go-to child actor back in the 50s and early 60s.
Oh no, he's got almost 100 credits. I'm just looking at him here on IMDb. Okay, because sometimes when you look at I'll see children in particularly films during this period, and then they lost interest, and so their career started and finished. But he's one of the ones. Yeah, exactly. But he's one of the ones who who
Yeah.
kept going because he's got almost 100 credits. He's still working. So there
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the rest of the story is that Hitchcock was trying to get the shot. It was the end of the day, and this 7-year-old kid was kind of getting antsy and fidgety. He was otherwise kind of a pro actor at that age. He was very consistent, but he's a 7-year-old kid too. And I guess what another kind of layer to this that I've heard is that you also had these union rules about child actors, how many hours they could work, how long a
Yes.
shooting day could be, on and on and on. And Hitch wasn't getting the shot. He was running out of time. If he couldn't bring the kid back for retakes, or he couldn't go overtime, otherwise they'd be fined and all kinds of things. And so he kind of did what he had to do to get him to settle down and get the shot. And now his, for 60 years on, his the whole story is perpetuated. So
That's such a
not
great
to let him off
story.
the hook, because it sounds like he
Yeah.
he probably came on a little strong. So not to let Hitchcock off the hook or anything.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, but he did such a great job. I thought everyone was quite good. I only felt the parents were their acting was a little on the broad side. Lucy Prentis and Biff Elliot, who played the Chesters. I don't know what you thought of them. I thought they're a little over the top for my taste.
Well, and I think they were. I think they're a little too father knows best, a little
exactly.
too white America. And again, I think that just plays right into this whole theme of, this sort of bland, ignorant, complacent white American privilege that was like at its height, in 1961. And, their home is perfectly sanitized. And even the grocery store was like really oddly organized, but then you have all these privileged white people who are just like, have no sense of what the world is really like. And they're just going about their day.
Totally apathetic.
Where's Cleo?
Well.
She's not here to make the canapes. I mean, that's all that matters to her,
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
she has no sense of maybe what her housekeeper has to do just to get across town and, get to work. And
right.
So,
right. I also liked in the grocery store how this woman comes in saying that her child is missing, and everyone's like, can you give us a second? Everyone is so, just like with the not being able to see that is a real, clearly not a toy gun. They can't even hear that there's an emergency. I thought that was really great. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that scene in the grocery store, because it's like it's a customer service nightmare, and it's all these once again, these privileged white, mostly women, demanding their customer service. That's all that matters to them, and and just not seeing the bigger picture. And it reminded me actually of the cafe scene in The Birds, where everybody's so concerned about just getting their chicken dinner or what's going to happen to me that they don't see the apocalypse that's right outside their window.
Yeah. And of course, that's another running theme we see is apathy in movies like The Birds and a lot of Hitchcock films. But I thought it was a wonderful episode. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about it?
No, I think that's it. What I really dig about it is putting it in context of Hitch's other film works that he was making at the time. So he had been thinking a lot about the Cold War, and had been thinking a lot about American, imperialism, colonialism, and how it was impacting us. We can see threads of that in North by Northwest, and in Vertigo, and in The Birds and Marnie, and Topaz as well. And this idea of Western powers just sort of blithely and blindly going about their business of dominating the world, and then the rest of the world having to pay the price for it. And I think that's kind of concentrated as well in this episode. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. So again, I thought it was a great episode. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. Or if you have, comment below and let us know what you think of this episode. So Joel, I'm so glad that we kicked this off with such a great episode. Bang, You're Dead. Thanks so much for doing this month. Yeah. Not you, Joel.
Congrats to your people who voted for it. They made an excellent choice.
Absolutely. Yeah, everybody voted for this. This got the complete total vote. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your what you do over on your Patreon page, the Hitchcock Geek page?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's not a whole lot going on the Patreon page itself, but people who sign up get access to our weekly events, our bi-weekly events, and also get discount tickets to our annual HitchCon. So right now we're doing 3 events on Wednesday evenings per month. One night, it's all via Zoom, and the first night we'll watch a Hitchcock movie. The second night, we'll watch a non-Hitchcock movie that is related to the Hitchcock movie. So it's kind of like a wine and food pairing. And then the third Wednesday, then we have, it's kind of a grab bag, but it's usually a talk. And so Doug Cunningham, who's been a regular speaker at HitchCon, gave a talk on Spellbound, and that was absolutely brilliant. And then we've got some great speakers already lined up for 2023. So yeah, if you go to patreon.com, Alfred Hitchcock Geek, that'll get you in there. And but drop me a line and love to chat. So
great. Fantastic. And I'll leave the links in the description box below for where you can get in touch with Joel and follow him on social media.
Yeah.
So Joel, thanks again. Looking forward to the next one next month.
Yeah, likewise. See you soon.